My relationship with Vince Gill and Ricky, I think the whole relationship kind of revolves around bluegrass music.
We are kind of, in a sense, Patty and Ricky grew up in that same part of the world that Ralph.
Patty Loveless stayed silent for years until one night in Nashville changed everything. In November 2025, the country music legend made a rare public appearance to honor Vince Gill, and what she said on stage immediately captured the attention of fans who had spent decades watching their friendship from afar. After years away from the spotlight, her emotional words offered a rare glimpse into a relationship that had shaped both of their careers. So why did Patty choose this moment to speak publicly about Vince Gill? And what did her appearance finally reveal about a friendship that has lasted more than 40 years? Join us as we uncover what Patty Loveless finally revealed about Vince Gill, the girl from Pikeville. Everything about Patty Loveless starts in eastern Kentucky, where getting out requires a combination of talent, nerve, and someone who believes in you before you believe in yourself. She was born Patricia Lee Ramey, the sixth of 7 children. Her father was a coal miner, and while the family was not wealthy, they had music, the specific tradition of Appalachian harmony, singing that runs in bloodlines through those mountains in a way that is difficult to explain to people who did not grow up inside it. Her distant cousin was Loretta Lynn. That connection was proof that what Patty Ramey heard in herself was real, and that it had happened before, and that eastern Kentucky could produce something the world was genuinely interested in hearing. When she was a teenager, the Wilburn brothers, Doyle and Teddy, who were managing Loretta Lynn's career, heard her sing and brought her to Nashville to perform with them. She was 14 years old at the time, and she performed on the Grand Ole Opry for the first time as a teenager. She moved back to Kentucky to finish school, came back to Nashville at 18, and began building a career in an industry that was not always welcoming to women who sang with the specific raw, unadorned honesty that she carried in her voice. Her first marriage was to Patty Loveless, a drummer, in 1976. She took a modified version of his surname as her stage name. Patricia Lee Ramey became Patty Loveless because the music industry in the late 1970s was not accommodating to a woman named Ramey, and because the name Loveless carried different associations she didn't want to invite. Loveless was the compromise. It stuck. The marriage ended in 1986. By then, she had already been signed to MCA Records, had found the producer who would become the central professional and personal relationship of her life, and had begun building the career that would produce 31 top 20 country hits, 5 CMA Award wins, 2 Grammy Awards, and a Country Music Hall of Fame induction that came 45 years after her first Opry appearance. Looking back, the timing almost feels scripted. One chapter of Patty Loveless's life was coming to a close, just as another was beginning to unfold. And waiting at the center of that new chapter was a man she would meet in the most ordinary place imaginable. The man she married in secret. The story of how Patty Loveless met her husband Emory Gordy Jr. is one of those Nashville stories that sounds almost too neat to be true, except that everyone involved has confirmed it exactly the same way. They met in an elevator at MCA Records in the mid-1980s. He was Emory Gordy Jr., a bassist who had played with Elvis Presley, Emmylou Harris, John Denver, and Neil Diamond, and who had become one of Nashville's most respected record producers. He was there working on other artists' projects. She was there trying to establish herself. They met in an elevator. Whatever happened in that elevator set something in motion that has been running ever since. What makes the story genuinely unusual is what they did about it once they decided they were serious. They married in Gatlinburg, Tennessee in 1989 and then told nobody for a year and a half. Not because they were ashamed of it, because Patty was trying to establish herself as an artist on her own terms, and marrying her producer was the kind of thing that would immediately generate the wrong conversation. The one about how her records sounded the way they sounded, not because of her talent, but because of who she shared a bed with. She told Woman's World that during that hidden year and a half, Emory would come home from work having heard all this industry feedback about this girl named Patty Loveless, and they would have dinner together that night, and she would have to keep a straight face. It worked. By the time the marriage became public knowledge, she had enough of a track record that the conversation was no longer about whether she deserved the production she was getting. It was about what the two of them were going to make together next. He produced nearly all of her albums across their professional partnership. The combination of his technical precision and her specific, mountain-bred emotional directness produced some of the most enduring country records of the 1990s, the kind of songs that people describe as the ones that got them through something, the ones that showed up in their lives at the exact right moment and said the exact right thing. But Emory Gordy Jr. was not the only important relationship Patty Loveless formed during those early years in Nashville. Around the same time her career was beginning to accelerate, another young artist was making his own way through the industry. Their paths would cross at a moment when neither could have known how closely their careers would become linked. The meeting that started everything. Patty Loveless and Vince Gill met at Fanfare in Nashville in 1985, the annual event where country music fans could meet the artists. A gathering that in the 1980s was genuinely intimate in a way that it later stopped being once country music went global. They had both recently signed with MCA Nashville around the same time, and the executive who connected them was Tony Brown, a producer and label figure who had a specific gift for identifying vocal chemistry before anyone else heard it. Tony heard what Vince and Patty could do together before they had done anything together, and he brought them into the same rooms deliberately. He was right. What happened when their voices combined was the thing that serious musicians describe as seamless. Two sounds that exist independently and fully, and that produce something different from either of them when placed in the same space. Not harmony in the technical sense alone, but harmonic personalities. They sang the same emotional language. What followed was one of the most productive and least celebrated vocal partnerships in country music history. Patty sang background vocals on Vince's early recordings. Vince sang background vocals on hers. He sang on When I Call Your Name and Pocket Full of Gold, both major Vince Gill hits. She sang on If My Heart Had Windows and a string of others. Across the span of their careers, Vince sang background on approximately 15 to 20 of her records. The exact count is not what matters. The pattern is what matters. These two people kept choosing to have each other's voice on their records. Vince, speaking to the Houston press, described the partnership with a specific clarity. He said that to him, one of the most seamless-sounding vocal partners he had ever had was Patty Loveless. He said there was something magical about their voices together that he was always drawn to. The admiration was not one-sided, and it was not limited to a handful of successful duets. As their collaborations continued, both artists began to realize that what they had together was increasingly rare in country music. The natural next step seemed obvious. The only surprise is that it never happened. The album they almost made. One of country music's great what-ifs belongs to Patty Loveless and Vince Gill. In the mid-1990s, they were actively planning a traditional male-female duet album, the kind of record that the classic country era had been built on. Two strong individual voices telling stories together that neither could tell alone. They were selecting songs. They were having label meetings. MCA Nashville was enthusiastic. It was on the verge of happening. And then Patty Loveless made a career decision that changed everything. She left MCA to sign with Sony Music. The two labels could not reach a commercial arrangement that would make the album possible. The project dissolved before it was ever recorded. The music they would have made together in that moment, Patty at the peak of her commercial powers, Gill at the height of his critical and commercial standing, both of them in their late 30s and singing at the absolute apex of what their voices were capable of, does not exist. The album that might have been one of the defining country vocal records of the decade simply was not made. She spoke about it years later with the specific wistfulness of someone who knows exactly what did not get made and why, and who has accepted the reality of it without pretending the loss is not real. Her comment at the time captured it simply. They had been selecting songs, having meetings. It was about to happen. And then her label change dissolved the idea. The country music world does not know what it did not receive when that project fell apart. What it does know is that the voices that were going to make it continued to find each other across the years, in other ways, on other records, in other rooms, because the musical friendship was always bigger than any single project. The unfinished duet album became one of country music's enduring what-ifs. But while fans were left wondering what those recordings might have sounded like, Patty Loveless was confronting a much more immediate concern: whether she would be able to sing the way she always had. The throat surgery that changed her voice. In 1999, Patty Loveless underwent vocal cord surgery to remove a cyst that had been affecting her ability to sing. She has spoken about the surgery and its aftermath with the honesty of someone who knows that her voice is not simply her instrument, but her entire identity as an artist. The thing that connects the girl from Pikeville, Kentucky, to every person who has ever heard one of her records and recognized something in it. The surgery worked. Her voice came back and she continued recording, touring, and making some of the most emotionally committed music of her career in the years that followed. But the surgery was also a reminder that the voice that had always felt elemental and permanent was in fact housed in a body, and that bodies have vulnerabilities, and that the instrument she had built her life around required a level of physical care that the pace of a touring career made it genuinely difficult to maintain. It informed the decisions she made in 2009 when she stepped back from touring. When Patty Loveless mostly retired from performing in 2009, the public explanation was gentle and vague. She was stepping back. She was content. She was enjoying a quieter life on the farm in Paulding County, Georgia, that she and Emory had moved to in 2001. She was doing occasional guest appearances. She was not going away completely. The real reason, which she eventually shared with more directness, was her husband. She told Woman's World that she had spent the last 14+ years taking care of Emory as he faced health issues. She did not specify what those health issues were in detail, and also did not frame it as sacrifice or loss. She described it as the choice she made, clearly and without apparent resentment, the way people who are fully committed to someone describe the decisions that commitment requires. She has described the secret to their long marriage as knowing how to separate work life from home life. She said they would come home, and she would fix dinner, and then she would start talking about what was going on with the label or management, and Emory would tell her to stop bringing work home with them. The discipline of keeping those two worlds separate was something they worked at, and the fact that their professional collaboration produced their best work, while their marriage remained intact across more than 35 years, suggests it worked. Over time, she learned to protect her home life from the demands of the industry. But while she stepped back from the constant cycle of touring and promotion, she never fully stepped away from the stage itself. The rare appearances that showed she had not lost a thing. Retirement from touring is not the same as retirement from music, and Patty Loveless has made that distinction clear across a small number of precisely chosen appearances that have reminded anyone who had forgotten exactly what she carries in that voice. In October 2022, Chris Stapleton brought her on stage at the Kentucky Rising Benefit Concert in Louisville, a flood relief event for Eastern Kentucky, the place she came from. A month later, at the 2022 CMA Awards, she and Chris performed "You'll Never Leave Harlan Alive Together," the song she had recorded for her 2001 Mountain Soul album. She opened alone, with only Chris's guitar underneath her, and sang the way she had always sung, like the song was the only thing in the room. In 2021, she appeared alongside Carly Pearce on Dear Miss Loretta, a tribute to Loretta Lynn written by Brandy Clark, Carly Pearce, and Shane McAnally that asked Patty's participation precisely because her voice carries the direct connection to that tradition that nobody else in current country music can claim. And then, on November 19, 2025, she came back to the CMA Awards to stand on a stage and honor the friend she has been making music with for 40 years. So what happens when an artist who has stepped back from the spotlight chooses to return? Not for herself, but for a friend she has shared nearly 40 years of music with. The night she walked out for Vince. The 59th Annual CMA Awards gave Vince Gill the Willie Nelson Lifetime Achievement Award on November 19, 2025. The tribute performance was by Brandi Carlile and Patty Loveless, who sang "When I Call Your Name," one of the signature Vince Gill records that Loveless had sung background vocals on in 1990. The choice of Patty for the tribute was not sentimental. It was accurate. If you are honoring Vince Gill's career with a performance, and if you want to do it with someone whose voice has been genuinely present across the most significant chapters of that career, there is no one more appropriate than Patty Loveless. Country Living documented the moment she addressed Gill directly from the stage. She looked toward where he was sitting in the audience and said, "Congratulations, Vinny." Then she said, "My buddy, I love you, brother." 5 words. My buddy, I love you, brother. That is 40 years of musical friendship, 40 years of backing each other's records, the duet album they almost made, the voices that kept finding each other across decades in studios and on stages, and at George Jones's funeral, all of it compressed into 5 words spoken from a Nashville stage by a woman who had driven from her farm in rural Georgia specifically to say them. Vince Gill accepted the award with the self-deprecating humor that is his specific gift. He noted that it was not lost on him that they had to get girls to come out and sing for him. He said none of the boys could get up that high. And then he cried. If Vince Gill's reaction showed anything, it was that this was not just an award ceremony performance. It was the visible trace of something that had lasted far longer than most collaborations in country music ever do. So what does Patty Loveless's presence in that moment ultimately confirm? The confirmation. What Patty Loveless confirmed at the 2025 CMA Awards, and what she has been confirming across her rare appearances and quieter statements in the years leading up to it, is something that country music has known but rarely said clearly enough. The Patty Loveless and Vince Gill friendship is one of the most genuine, most musically significant, and least commercially exploited relationships in the history of the genre. They were not a romantic couple. They were not business partners in any formal sense. They were 2 people who heard something in each other's voices that they could not replicate anywhere else, who spent 40 years backing each other's records and showing up for each other's professional milestones, and sitting beside each other at George Jones's funeral, singing "Go Rest High on That Mountain" in a moment of public grief that both of them have described as genuinely difficult to get through. Vince has called her one of the most seamless-sounding vocal partners he has ever had. She has called him one of the greatest country voices of her era. Neither of them has ever suggested the other is anything less than what they are. which is two of the finest vocalists that country music has ever produced, who happen to make something extraordinary when their voices share the same room. So what does it say about the music industry that the greatest vocal partnership that Vince Gill ever described had to wait for his Lifetime Achievement Award for the world to finally stop and pay attention to it? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.